Okay.
Hey everybody, it's Brad Montgomery. I am so glad to be with you. Beth Ertz thought that this would be a fun way to interview one of the people that you need to know more about, one of the people that we all need to learn more from. So please welcome, right here in Lakewood, coming to you live from Rhode Island, we've got Richard Gamache. Richard. So
Brad,
it's,
very nice to see you.
it's my pleasure, Rick. I'm glad you're here. So here's what I know about you. I know you are a leader in this industry. You're the CEO of Aldersbridge Communities. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
And you're a leader in this field. We're talking today about leadership. When you're talking to other leaders about how to be a better leader, where does that lead? Where does that lead you? What comes to mind as the top of the pile there?
Well, it's changed, right? Our culture has changed, and we as leaders need to respond to that change. So the days of like command and control, the old fashioned way, those days are long gone. And now I see it more as the need for relationship based leadership. I remember my first job. My boss yelled at me one day for whatever, and I thought to myself, okay, he's the boss. He gets to yell. And the next day, I came back to work, and I was thinking, I'm lucky I have a job. Well, that isn't the case anymore, right? That the people who we employ, I know for my children, if their boss treated them the way that boss treated me, they'd probably say, I don't need this. I can go work somewhere else. So I think that uh, the way things used to be done is not an acceptable way for things to be done anymore. So, what I mean by relationship centered leadership is really about a couple of things. First, Uh, just as we're trying to inculcate person directed, person centered care in our care and treatment for elders, we need to bring the same kinds of practices and principles to how we recruit and retain. We all know that the way we want our staff to treat our residents is the way we as leaders need to treat our staff. So, an exercise to do is to say to the management team, how do we want our elders treated? And I remember doing this with my leadership team many years ago, and the leadership team said, we want our elders treated with love, compassion, and respect. And then
Oh,
I asked the leadership team, how do we treat our staff? And they said, oh, that's easy. We're equitable, we're consistent, and we're fair.
ah,
Now, so
that
on one
is
hand,
that's a miss.
right, right. I mean, love, compassion, and respect is greater than, uh, you know, being equitable, compassionate, and fair, right? So we need to raise our game as leaders, and part of it is that we need to have better communication with staff. We need to not only the face-to-face meetings are vitally important, but any other means of communication, using technology to get text messages out to staff, not just about open positions and open
Right,
shifts to pick up, but messages about different things that you want to be able to
right,
communicate. Something big happening in the organization that you want people to
sure.
know. Staff surveys, critically important. I think with staff surveys over the years, they've gotten a bad rap. And when we want staff to fill them out, we get the feedback, we read it, and we say, oh, yeah, okay. And we put it in a file drawer. When the fact is, that information is only valuable when you respond to it. So,
Yeah,
so
surveys without any action is a waste of time.
exactly. So what I think we need to do more of is making sure that we bring those surveys back to staff meetings and say, you told us that our orientation program is not what it needs to be. You told us that our training program, and here's what we're doing. These are the steps. And when you take that approach, what's going to happen is that staff is going to be empowered and they're going to give you more feedback
Oh,
rather than just say, "Oh, I'm not even going to bother filling out the next survey because they didn't do anything about the 10
right.
things I listed last time," right?
Yeah, of
Which is
course.
how it tip. Now, one of the things that we learned in our staff surveys was that half of the people who work in our organization were recruited to the job by people who work in the organization.
Ooh,
So when we have a job opening, and everyone right now has job openings, we had been typically going to the Indeed and Job Recruiter online and doing the postings and
sure.
doing open houses and all of the things that everyone else is doing. When the fact is, the best way, the most effective way for us to recruit is to ask our staff to recruit. Is to say to them, we really need help and we need more people like you, and
Yeah.
you told us that you have recruited half the people that work here, half of them you recruited. And I think that that's why recruitment and referral incentives
Yeah.
make sense at this time.
Well, plus it
uh,
seems like you're rewarding your staff by saying, "I respect you enough to ask for your help and advice."
you'd rather have the money go to them than go to an online ad agency, right? Yeah,
Rick, let me take a step backwards because you're just dropping these brilliant bombs in here, but we got to grab a couple of them.
sure.
You said something that makes sense to me. You treat those patients for whom you care with compassion and love and respect. And so, too, we should treat the people on our team with love and compassion and respect. That seems, when I hear it come out of your mouth, like a obvious thing. Like, yeah, duh. But it's not obvious because so many organizations don't do that. Why is that? Why is it so easy for you to see that? And what are the rest? Why are we missing this?
Well, for me, I didn't always practice that. That came from training through the Eden Alternative, which works very closely with the Live Oak Project and Live Oak Regenerative Communities. Very similar philosophies and complementary to one another. And but Principle 8 of the Eden Alternative talks about leadership and introduces that sort of golden rule of the way staff, the way managers treat staff is the way staff will treat elders. So once that becomes something that your team agrees to, and it is obvious and it's something that doesn't take much time, then I think talking about how you want elders treated uh, sort of dictates or directs you to what kind of culture you want to
Right.
have in your organization. And I think where it's easy to say we want residents treated with love, compassion, and respect, I think when it comes to staff, because there's so much leftover vestiges of the old sort of command and control style, I think that it's hard to think about love and compassion and respect when you've got staff members who are continually late or don't show up or don't
Right.
seem to care or those kinds of things. And I know that for us, the conversations that we've had is that, for example, I love my children. I love my children, but I was strict with them growing up. They had um, times that they had to be home. I had to know where they were at all times. There was accountability built into the relationship, and if they failed to meet an expectation that was clear to them and clear from me, then there was some form of discipline. You've got to you're grounded, or we're taking your phone away, or
Right.
something, right?
I'm
And
wondering if this leads to you grounding your staff. That's just what I'm thinking.
yeah, they probably feel like that sometimes. But I think my point is that when you talk about love from a leadership team to staff, people say, I'm not really a touchy feely kind of leader, and maybe
Right.
this isn't for me. But the fact is, we love our children, but it doesn't mean we let them get away with everything. And it's not like it's a one way street where we're just constantly, oh, I love you, walking around the building hugging people. I know that with uh, human resources advising against
Yeah,
touch and things. I mean, let's face it, we live in a litigious society and people
right.
misinterpret things
All right.
sometimes.
So
And
keeping hugs to a respectful minimum. I get it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that there are ways that you can communicate your love to your staff. You can communicate it with words as one way, and in writing and actions. You can also do it by quality time, spending
Mm,
quality time with them.
nice.
you can you can do it by doing service for them. Say like, there's an important service that I want you to attend, and I'm going to stay up here on the floor and answer the call lights for you so that you can take part in this.
Yeah,
This
powerful.
tells the staff member you're important. You're an important person here, and our relationship is important.
I was talking to a leader from a corporate group, so much less personal service than what you were delivering. And I asked her, well, how do you train your other leaders to do exactly what you're talking about, Rick, to demonstrate love and compassion and respect to your leaders? And she said, I'll tell you that, Brad. But first, just tell me, how are you? How are you right now? And I started to answer, and then I realized, oh, you did it. You
Yep,
just did it.
you
So,
just did it.
what I'm trying to say is, I hear you. Demonstrating love doesn't mean you're crossing some Me Too boundaries or you're weird. It just means letting people know that they're important and you listen to them. Am I getting that
Yeah,
right?
you're exactly right. We need to show that we care for the people who work for us. And certainly in today's labor market, where there are lots of choices for people to find other positions, it's very important for people to know that they feel cared about. We know from research that when people leave a position, they usually leave because of a boss that they work for that they
Mm,
don't like anymore. So they're going to go to another position and try to find another boss. But if you're the one that shows that you care about them, that they are important, their opinions matter to you and to the organization, then you're likely to retain them. In fact, I talked a little bit about the 50% of staff were recruited by staff that are currently on board. One of the questions that staff surveys often ask is, do you have a best friend at work? And would you recommend this job to a friend? And if a staff member answers yes to those two questions, the chances of them leaving your employment are minuscule, because if they have a
ah,
best friend there, they're connected. So, relationship centered leadership not only means your relationship with the staff, it means relationships between staff members, and you're going to have to foster those through employee events or through different social opportunities for staff members, or team training, team discussions, holding meetings instead of department meetings, holding meetings that are more interdisciplinary in nature, so that you have a neighborhood meeting on a floor where the housekeeper is there and maintenance is there
ah,
and the social worker and the nursing assistants and the nurse and everyone part of the same team, rather than think of each other in these siloed departments, as we've been accustomed to doing, because regulations sort of make us think that way.
right. What I'm hearing is leadership is not your grandpappy's leadership. It's not your parents' leadership. It's 2022. We need to get with it.
We do. And I think that also extends to outside of the building, that you need to recognize, leaders need to recognize that they're part of a greater community. And we need to build relationships with other organizations in our community that we can work with, whether it's senior centers or senior housing, or people in the state that you work in. Those relationships really matter, and it's best to cultivate them with your elected officials. It's best to cultivate all of those relationships because when you need them, that person or that
Yeah.
organization, it's important that they know who you are.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if we can make this personal. You've been a leader for a long time and you've worked with, I'm assuming, hundreds of people. Can you give us a specific example of this concept in action, either when it was a fail or when it was a win?
Well, sure, I can probably think of a few. And certainly, I've been in this business over 40 years, and I have the scars to prove it. It's really, really
Okay,
a
let's
tough.
see him. Come on. Let's see the scars. Okay, too much. Hey, that's not appropriate, everybody. We're joking.
I think that the first relationship that I had in this profession was the person who hired me back in 1981, the administrator of the nursing home that hired me. And I was a part time activity assistant. And I was going to college and I had kind of a outlook on life that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my
Hmm.
life. And I really wasn't really kind of into elder care in particular. This was just something I was doing for spending money. And I ended up, first of all, falling in love with the work, falling in love with the elders. And then the administrator sort of took a liking to me and began to talk to me about what do you see in your future? This is what I see in your future. And he saw a lot more in me than I did at that point for potential. I ended up going back, getting my master's degree, and having a long and enjoyable,
Oh,
satisfying career.
Rick, how
And
did that
that,
person specifically demonstrate that he saw potential in you?
well, he told me. He told me that
Oh,
I see you as a leader. I see that you have the ability to people listen when you speak, and so he encouraged me. But he was
oh,
my mentor then, and he's my mentor now. In fact, just before we started this, I called him about something. We probably see each other for lunch once a month,
hmm.
and this has been going on now, our relationship, for 41 years. So I think that's an extreme example of relationship centered leadership where he was the leader in this case, and he has encouraged me to take different
Mm,
opportunities and encouraged me, here's a book you should read, here's a seminar that you should attend, the whole way. And so I think the importance of mentorship as part of the relationship
yeah.
goes a long way.
What's that person's name?
Bruce Glass.
I know without ever meeting or speaking with Bruce Glass that he is ridiculously proud of you, Rick. All right, so you have shared so much of your valuable time. I'm grateful, but I'm going to put a dare out there, and I'm thinking it's from both of us. That means if you're listening to this program, either if you're in the room in Lakewood with Beth Ertz or you're one of our virtual attendees, I double dog dare you to pull a Bruce and find somebody in your building, in your world, who is a young Rick, and build them up and let them know you care. Are any last words, Rick? Is there anything that I failed to ask you?
Well, I think that we've covered. I think we've covered everything. I just wish everyone success in this, and I want to close with this: that in the 41 years that I've been in this profession, this field, the last two and a half or so has been the most difficult for me, as it
Mm,
has been for everyone,
yeah,
between the COVID pandemic and the staffing shortage, the crisis that we're in, the health emergency that the country is facing with not enough qualified people to fill the jobs to care for people who need care. But besides being the most difficult couple of years of my career, they've also been, in a strange way, the most satisfying years of my career. And here's why. I've seen, and I'm sure the rest of you have seen, staff members do extraordinary things during these last few years. Back when we first got our first two COVID positive elders, before there were vaccines, before we didn't have enough PPE, we were going through
Yeah.
everything that everyone in the country was going through. And we sat down with staff and we said, we have two positive residents here. And we asked if any staff members would volunteer to take care of them. We didn't want to force someone because people were deathly afraid. And we had heard stories of other places where staff just walked out once they found out someone was positive. And I think because of the relationships that we already had with staff, when we asked that question, hands went up and staff members said, we're taking care of those people. Those are
Mm.
our residents. Those
Oh,
are our elders, right? And I get the goosies just repeating that to you because of the feeling that it gave me that day. And over and over and over again, people doing extraordinary things like that has renewed my faith in humanity and brought me back, I think, to what initially drew me into this role. And so it's been a nice way to come back to all of that good feeling
yeah.
that we have about elders. We all have something intrinsic uh, with our connection to elders, and that's what keeps us going.
Rick Gamache, you are a Care Bear. And I mean that in all of the best ways. Not only are you a very successful leader leading this very large organization, but clearly you've had success in understanding the power of relationships as it relates to leadership. That story you told is so crucial to me because so often when we're talking to people about you need to love on people and give to them and build them up and motivate and inspire them, the question is sometimes, well, what's in it for me and what's in it for the organization? And you just demonstrated what's in it for the organization is fully engaged employees who care and want to make a difference. Well done, you.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, turn to Beth Ertz and say, thanks, Beth Ertz. If you're in the chat room, hit that chat box. Thank you, Beth Ertz. Definitely say, Rick, you're amazing. You're a Care Bear in the best way. My name is Brad
Thank you very
Montgomery.
much.
We got more for you, everybody. Thanks for having us.